So at the top of the page in the middle, we've got the title of the piece, which is Broadway Bounce. And then towards the left of the page, beneath that, we've got the letter A in a box. So that's letting you know it's section A. So the start of the piece, we've got section A. Beside that, we've got show two fill, which is the genre or the style of the piece. So this piece is very typical of theatre show music. Okay, and we've got a quarter note equals 88, so that's the tempo of the piece. So the quarter note pulse we're feeling in this piece, there's going to be 88 of them per minute. Okay, so that's the tempo. Beneath that, we've got our first bar of music. You can see we've got our percussion clef or neutral clef there, letting you know it's drum notation on the stave. Beside that, we've got our time signature. So we've got 2-4, so we've got 2 at the top, which tells you there's 2 beats in the bar. The 4 at the bottom tells you those beats. We're going to be feeling our quarter notes. So we've got 2 quarter notes in the bar. So we've got 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, so if you look at our first bar of music, we've got 2 rhythms there. The top rhythms with our hands. We've got an 8th note rest on the 1, and we're going to play the and of 1 as an 8th note on the hi-hat and snare. So we've got rest and we've got the same on the second beat as well. So we rest on the 2 for an 8th note, play the and of 2 with our hands. So we've got rest and rest and. On the bass drum, so our second rhythm in the bar, we're just playing quarter notes. So we're playing the 1 and the 2. So you've got bass on 1, hands playing together on the and of 1, bass on 2, hands playing together on the and of 2. So we got. Okay, so that's our 2 fill. Okay, so we're going to try that groove, just looping it through just to get used to that groove, hitting those backbeats on the ands, those upbeats, and beneath the bar you can see we've got MF, so that's our dynamic. That means that's short for mezzo forte, which means half loud. Okay, so that's about our normal playing level, so we're going to bring that in as well when we play this groove. So let's try that groove now. And you can see in the next bar you've got a 1 bar repeat, so that means repeat the previous bars. You're going to play the groove again, and you can see we've got more 1 bar repeats there, and it goes all the way to the end of the second line. Okay, so you can see above the bars it just says the bar number there, letting you know how many times you're playing the groove. So when you repeat something in drums a lot, it's good to keep tabs on how many times you've played it, so we can just count those bar numbers there above the bar. Okay, so you play the groove 8 times when you come to the end of line 2. Okay, and then we come into line 3 at bar 9. We've got the same groove again there, and then we're repeating it again in the next bar as well. So we're playing it for another 2 bars. So we've got the groove for 8 bars for lines 1 and 2, and then we've got it for another 2 bars for line 3. So we're playing the groove for 10 bars. And if we come to bar 11, we see we've got a quarter note on the hi-hat, then a quarter note on the crash, then a bass drum with those 2 cymbals. So we've got bass drum and hi-hat, bass drum and crash as quarter notes, and then we've got a bass drum and crash, bass drum and crash for next bar. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we're going to try those 2 bars, so bars 11 and 12. And you can also see beneath those 2 bars, we've got a crescendo. So we've got that opening mouth there, that crescendo sign, which tells us we need to get louder. So we know we've been at MF for this section, so that's half loud. So we need to start the crescendo at half loud and get louder, gradually get louder throughout the crescendo. Okay, so let's try those 2 bars with the crescendo. So that brings us to the end of section A, so let's try that whole section now. So we've got the groove for 10 bars, and then we've got our 2 bar crescendo where we're playing quarter notes, 1 on the hi-hat and the rest on the crash with the bass drum. Okay, so let's try and put the whole of section A together. And now we're going to try section A with the backing track. So remember, this piece is a theatre style upbeat piece. We really need to portray that in our playing. So let's try section A now with the backing track. And at the end of section A, in the final bar, you can see we've got a double bar line letting us know the music's changing. So as we come into line 4, you can see we've got a letter B in a box now, letting us know this is section B of the song. So a new section. Now we're going to look at the first bar of section B. So bar 13, we've got a quarter note on the snare drum with the bass drum. So both quarter notes, we're playing 1, snare drum and bass drum. And then we've got 16th notes on the 2. So we've got 2 E and on the snare drum as well. So we're going to play that as single strokes. So you've got right on the snare with the bass drum, then right, left, right, left. And then coming into the next bar, so bar 14, we've got 8th notes on the small tom or the high tom, 1 and we've got 16th notes on the downbeat and an 8th note on the upbeat on the floor tom or the low tom. So we've got 2 E and. So those 2 bars, we've got 1, 2 E and 3 and 4 E and. So we got. Okay, so let's try that first of all, those 2 bars, putting those 2 bars together. We'll try it 4 times through. And then in the next bar, so bar 15, we've got a quarter note on the snare drum and bass drum again. And then we've got 8th notes on the 2 on the floor tom. So we've got 2 and, just the right, left there. So we've got. And then we've got 16 notes on the downbeat and an 8th note on the upbeat on the floor tom for the next bar, and also a quarter note. So you've got 1 E and 2. So we're going to play right, left, right, right. So those 2 bars together, so bars 15 and 16, we've got. So that line is a real drum feature. So you play with the band when you play the snare and the bass drum together. And then when you play the rest of those 2 bars where there's no bass drum, you're playing by yourself. So it's like a drum solo really filling the gaps. Okay, then we come into the next line of that section. So at bar 17, we've got a snare drum as a quarter note with the right hand. So we've got 1, then we crash on the 2 for a quarter note with the bass drum. We did the same thing in bar 18, so you got snare, crash and bass again. So let's try those 2 bars now. So we got. And then we come into the next bar where we got snare, kick, snare, kick. So the snare drum's playing quarter notes, so it's playing 1, 2, and the bass drum's playing those upbeats on the ands. So you can play this left, kick, left, kick. You can play it right, kick, or you play it right, kick, left, kick. Okay, so let's try it left. So we got. And then in the final bar of that line, you've got kick on the 1. You've got 8th note rest with your hands. So we're playing the floor tom and the snare drum on the upbeats. We've got 8th note on the and of 1 there. So we're playing together on the and of 1. And then we've got a quarter note on the downbeat with those 2 drums. So the snare and the floor tom on the 2. So that final bar is. You've got 1 and 2. Okay, so playing those last 2 bars of that line, we've got. Okay, so we're going to give that whole line a try now. So line 5 of the piece, so from bar 17 to bar 20. Okay, so you see we've got that double bar line at the end of bar 20 again, because this is the end of section B. Okay, so let's try the second line of section B. So let's try the whole of section B now, putting those 2 lines together. So let's try section B in time with a backing track. So remember, This section is a real drum feature, so we're playing with the band where we hit that snare and bass drum together in the first line of section B, and then we're really filling in those gaps on our own. So we've got to make sure we're really playing those solid fills around the kit. And then when we come into the second line of section B, there's lots of hits with the band, all right? So make sure your rhythm's really precise for that line as well. So let's try the whole of section B in time with the backing track. And now into the next line, we can see we've got a C in the box now, so let us know it's section C of the song, a new section, and you can see we come back to the initial groove that we played in the piece. So the same groove we had in section A, where we're playing those quarter notes on the bass drum and the hi-hat and snare on the upbeats on the ands. Okay, and we can also see beneath that bar we've got MF, so mezzo forte again, like we had in the first section as well. So we played mezzo forte for the first section, then we went up to forte for section B, so we went up to play loud, and now we're coming back down to mezzo forte, half loud. Okay, so we're bringing the dynamic back down for this section, and we're playing that groove again for 8 bars. So you can see at the end of line 2 of section C, we've got a number 8 written above that final 1 bar repeat, letting us know it's the 8th time of playing that groove. Okay, so we play the groove for 8 bars, and then we come into the final line of the piece. So we got hits on the hi-hat, snare and bass drum together in unison. We play it on the 1 for the first bar of the last line, and then we've got a quarter note rest on 2. Then we play it for both beats of the second bar of the last line. So we got 1, 2, so hi-hat, snare and bass together again. And then we've got in the third bar of the last line, we hit together on the 1 again. So we play a quarter note on 1 on all 3 parts of the kit, and then rest on the 2 again. And then in the final bar of the piece, we rest on 1 and play the hi-hat and snare on the 2. And you can see beneath that note, that final note, we've got an F, so that's forte. So that last note is going to be played loud. Okay, you can see it's the final bar of the piece because we've got that final bar line there. Okay, so the last section of the song, you need to make sure you're playing together, so in unison on the hi-hat, snare and bass drum. So we hit the 1, then we hit the 1 and the 2, then we hit the 1, and in the final bar, we're bringing the dynamic up, and we're just hitting the hi-hat and snare on the 2. No bass drum on that final note. Okay, so the final line we've got 2, 1. Okay, so a nice loud abrupt finish. Okay, so let's try that last line in time with the metronome. And now we'll try the whole of section C. So we've got our groove for 8 bars at mezzo forte, and then we've got our hits at the end of the piece, those quarter note hits. And then make sure that last note you're bringing up to forte. Remember, it's a nice big finish on that final note. So let's try the whole of section C. And now the whole of section C in time with the backing track. So you're predominantly just keeping time, just holding that groove to make sure that groove's really solid, you're playing at the right dynamic, and those hits at the end, nice and in time. So you're hitting those down beats, and obviously resting where you need to rest. And don't forget that final note on the hi-hat and snare drum at forte. Okay, so let's try section C in time with the backing track. And now we're going to put all 3 sections together. So sections A, B and C. So remember, you're coming in at section A, you're just keeping time with that groove. And then we've got those quarter note hits at the end of section A with the crescendo. So we're gradually getting louder, taking us into section B with a dynamic lifts to forte. So make sure you've got that energy and dynamic in section B. It's that drum feature section, so make sure you're playing those fills nice and boldly in that section. And when we come into section C, we're going back to the groove, so really keep time with that groove, and we're bringing that dynamic back down to mezzo forte. We've got those quarter notes in the last bar, so make sure you're really precise with those quarter notes, and then our finish on the 2 of the final bar at forte. Okay, so let's put that all together now. And now let's try the whole piece in time with the backing track. So remember, this is a theatre style 2-fill piece, so really portray that in your playing. It's really upbeat, hold time with the groove, make sure our crescendos are really tidy, our rhythms are really bold and precisely played, and just make sure those hits, especially those quarter note hits, are really in time, because they're usually with the rest of the band. Okay, so it needs to sound nice and tidy, so really bring that across in your playing. Let's try it through with a backing track. So remember, we practice through all the parts at song tempo, which is 88 beats per minute. So remember, that's the goal tempo we want to get to. So bring these parts down to a comfortable tempo for you, and then gradually build them up until you're comfortable. Okay. Once you're there at song tempo, then try it with the backing track. Okay, so don't rush this through. Don't rush through the parts. Don't play the parts with the music when you're not quite ready, because obviously that's going to come across in your playing. We don't want it to sound messy and untidy and uncomfortable. We want it to be solid and comfortable. Okay, so really gradually build up those tempos when you practice these parts.